Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. As the House will know, we have incoming news of this terrible disaster with the flight out of Ahmedabad in India, and I know the Leader will want to say a few words, but let me just say that from our side, and I'm sure I speak for the whole House in wishing everyone involved the very best, and to them and their families. It would be a bad day this week, Mr. Speaker, if I didn't mention the fantastic news of the knighthood to Sir Billy Boston, and therefore it's nice to be able to do that, and I hope you will admire my restraint, Mr. Speaker, in not mentioning your birthday, and therefore not giving any incentive to any other member of the House to mention it in their remarks today. As you did, I had the dubious pleasure of listening to yesterday's spending review in this chamber. It brought to mind President Abraham Lincoln's immortal line in managing to compress the greatest number of words into the smallest amount of content. But I'm afraid the statement was somewhat worse than that. It was, in both its design and its delivery, an exercise in distraction and sleight of hand, a document not of economic strategy but of political evasion. We should be clear from the outset, this was, of course, a spending review. It was not a budget. Therefore, unlike a budget, it was not subject to scrutiny by the Office for Budget Responsibility. The Chancellor's figures have therefore not been externally verified. Her assumptions have not been stress-tested. Her projections have not been independently reviewed. She was not required to publish the full fiscal implications or to give the embarrassing numbers in her own remarks, and of course she did not. But even within the confines of departmental budgets, the presentation was, I'm afraid to say, somewhat disingenuous. A final year outside the actual spending review period was included, filled with speculative figures designed to suggest rigour and restraint in budgetary control. This is the illusion of discipline without the reality of delivery. In case any member is interested, it's on page 13 of the document, Mr. Speaker. Elsewhere, baseline figures were conveniently shifted. Most comparisons began from the year 2023-24, not the current year, which had the effect of inflating the apparent scale of any increases. Sizewell C is a classic example. The document, I should say, trumpets a near 16% increase in investment. In truth, spending over the period is falling by 3.7%. That is on page 44. Similarly, police funding. The Chancellor was very careful in her language to say that there would be an increase in police spending power, but what she actually meant, of course, was that there would be an increase in the local authority precept. In plain English, a tax rise. The same obfuscation was at work with overseas development aid. The Chancellor has always said that ODA cuts were needed to fund defence, but the reality is that defence increases are almost entirely in capital spending, while ODA is a cash line. Far from funding our national defence, what's actually happened here is that overseas development aid has been cut to prop up other departments' day-to-day budgets. But the most obvious case, Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid to say, is defence itself. We were told in grand rhetoric that defence spending would rise to 2.5% and later to 3% of GDP at some undefined moment when fiscal circumstances allow. In fact, it's unlikely that even 2.5% will be reached this Parliament. The 2.6% quoted includes the single intelligence account, which suggests that the number is actually below 2.5%. The actual plan, the plan that will release the money, the Defence Investment Plan, is unlikely to appear until the end of the year. That's nearly 18 months after the 2024 general election. This at a time of war in Ukraine, this with China potentially positioning itself for conflict over Taiwan by 2027. On Monday, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, echoed yesterday by no less than Lord Robertson himself, said that unless NATO members raise defence spending to 3.5%, with an additional 1.5% in wider support, we may as well, quote, start learning Russian. That is the strategic context. The government's response, however, has been to dither and delay. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor's U-turn over the winter fuel payment badly damaged whatever credibility she ever had. Yesterday's statement has compounded the problem for her and for the government. No mention was made of the estimated 5% annual council tax increases now expected as flagged by Paul Johnson of the IFS. No admission was made that this review will add £140 billion in new borrowing. That's an extra £10 billion a year in interest payments by the end of the period at current rates. Meanwhile, the supposed efficiency savings of nearly £14 billion are widely regarded as illusory. As the Chancellor herself said about the spending review, these are her choices. But the truth is plain. There will be a tax cut for the people of Mauritius. For the rest of us, the spending review was a gigantic, speculative splurge of spending presented via smoke and mirrors, which will end up, as it always does with Labour, with higher taxes, and British taxpayers will have to bear the impact.